Good evening and welcome to Plain Talk. This is a special edition of Plain Talk. It's in response to public requests that we ought to have such a program given the significance of the appointment by President David Granger of Justice James Patterson as head of the Guyana Elections Commission, GECOM, as you know, for several months. Almost approaching a year, there have been concerns that of the vacancy and the delay in appointing someone to replace Dr. Steve Surjbali. The private sector has come out strongly against the manner of the appointment, whilst the Alliance for Change, a major party in the ruling coalition, has expressed support for Mr. David Granger while saying that they were never consulted. On Plain Talk for the next hour is Ms. Annette Arjoon Martins, Mr. Ramesh Persaud, and Mr. Devdat Indar, all leading private sector persons, as you notice as well. They are very young people, and so therefore they have a great stake in what's happening and what has happened and will happen in our country. Let me welcome all of you to this program.
Thank you for having us.
This appointment was made, I think, on Friday,
Thursday night?
Thursday evening. And the Private Sector Commission on Friday issued a statement. This statement was strongly concerned about the business effects of this decision. Why should this decision, which in fact helps to fill a constitutional void, be seen in such frightening and negative terms? Anyone can start.
All right, if I could give a go at that. Politics plays an important part in business in our country. And the state, in this particular instance, and the governance mechanism plays an important element in how businesses are run. The manner in which a decision was made has been deemed controversial, and that is what we've always tried to avoid at the Private Sector Commission in all of our work that we have done, even as civil society representative. You do not want GECOM to be an organization of controversy. Good? You want GECOM to be seen as an organization that is one that is contributing to fair play. Good? That it is above board.
And fair elections.
And fair elections and everything else of that sort. It is our view that this particular decision will not contribute to GECOM being as non-controversial. It will raise a lot of issues about its credibility. When Mr. Ram, you're a lawyer and you present case to jury, if there's a shadow of doubt, the judges usually indicate that the benefit must go to the defendant, all right? And for such an important institution like GECOM, there should be no doubt about its credibility. There should be no cloud over it, all right? And we believe that would have led to political instability, as we've already seen the opposition calling out to say that they do not want to cooperate and so forth. Such political instability leads to economic instability. And the economic instability is what we are concerned with as businesses, not because of our investment, but because of the people we employ. They're the ones that are going to suffer. All of us are going to suffer if there's economic instability as a result of political instability.
Annette, you want to have a...
No, absolutely. I mean, Ramesh captured it very nicely. And when he started off, I remember being very clear that every single international investor that we would engage with, one of the biggest criteria would always be the political stability, which of course is very important, and more important than that as well too is to remember that prior to 1992, that the political instability then and the social unrest was what actually drove the whole Carter Price formula being developed, and the fact that that Carter Price formula has not been so respected in the sense that for the first time since 1992, we've had a chairman of the Election Commission unilaterally appointed. That in itself, as Ramesh alluded to, will have an impact in undermining the integrity, or be seen to be undermining the integrity of the electoral process. So they're all connected very clearly, and this is what concerns us, not only from the economic aspect of the Private Sector Commission, but for us, I'm a member of the governance subcommittee, and we know this because we have seen it and we have experienced it, and it's very worrisome for us. And as you said, as young entrepreneurs as well, we ought to be concerned about this and see how it could be addressed.
Ms. Indar, if I can ask you, and you can pick up on the same issue, but if I can ask you, do you think former President Jaglio contributed to this impasse that developed, that forced President Granger to act unilaterally?
So let me answer your first question, and then I'll go to the second one. So the first thing is that any person looking to invest in any country, regardless how small, how large that investment is, they look for stability. Everybody wants stability. So normally, rating agencies like Standards and Poor's and those places, when they do their rating, one of the main criteria is stability, economic stability. Now, persons can argue that not having a strong democracy, or having a strong democracy, does not translate into instability. Case in point, Singapore, right? But because of our history in Guyana and past protests around elections and those kind of things, it did create. We do have a track record of being an unstable nation when it comes around election time, and with the protests, and it does have an impact on business. Normally does have a lot of closures happen. No activity happen around that time. So the reason for the private sector issue that statement is because of track record as well, apart from the current issue with the unilateral appointment. Go back to the question you asked about the opposition leader. In the Constitution, and I'm not any learned lawyer, but in the Constitution it's written in English, and if you read it, it clearly states the process, right? In English language, anybody can pick it up and read it, Section 161, right? And it says that there is a process to appointing a chairman. Appointment of the chairman is this end. It starts from a process of consultation with wide civil society, done via the office of the opposition leader, who then comes up with 6 names on a list, not multiple lists, a single list, that is then presented to the president, and then the president shall choose a name from that list. It's clear. It's English language. There's no technical jargon there. So if you ask if he's erred from that process there, his responsibility, I believe, was to provide a list via consultation, and that was done. It was first one was rejected. I think the explanation that was given that the names was wiped from the list, but that list remains. That single list remains. A second 6 names went on. That was wiped because of rejection, and then there's a third list again that was wiped. Thursday night when that decision to appoint Mr. Patterson as chair. So if you put the actions and the process side by side with the Constitution to see if there is any breakage, you'll see that, from directly answering a question about the opposition leader, his responsibility was to provide that list, and that list was provided.
Mr. Ram, I would leave the constitutional arguments for the courts and lawyers, and for those most learned than us to make those kinds of pronouncing. But what we're talking about here is that...
but my question was simply whether we thought...
if I can just step back to add some more to what I said earlier. On this entire issue of why it's such an important element to have what we would deem to be, bipartisan, the right word? Selection of the chairman, and not a unilateral selection of the chairman. I mean, for 50 years as a country, there's a lot of distrust that we all have amongst each other as a country. We're coming out from a background whereby many international documents and observers and so forth would have made allegations about governments of the past. We thought that we would have gone over that hurdle, right? Whereby we would have thought that the Carter Price formula was a good model. correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Carter Price formula was followed even before our constitution was amended
That's
in
correct.
2001.
That's
So
correct.
it showed good faith in those parties
Yes.
at that point in time to follow the Carter Price, even if it wasn't part of the constitution. So to argue whether this is constitutional or not constitutional, I think goes beyond the point here. What we're talking about is fairness. One party is given the opportunity to produce the names. That means all of those persons were vetted. And the other party is to select one out of
The president, rather than
yeah, it's to select that. And by party, I'm meaning the office holders in this particular instance. By the unilateral selection, the other side would continuously claim foul because they had no opportunity of vetting that person as they would have done for the 80 names that would have gone through. And this is the kind of distrust that we don't want in our society. Good. These are things we should try to avoid to the best of our ability from happening. All right, and that's why we are deeply concerned about this.
But Chris, just
Let me
yeah,
put
sure.
in a question. Is the Private Sector Commission suggesting that the president, having taken the route that he has taken, is going to lead to that instability?
Well, for me, I think it's very important for us to be clear that whoever wins by dividing a nation will not be able to govern the people as ought to happen, right? Apart from that, you're also destroying any hope for social cohesion. So yes, I mean, I think in terms of this decision, this unilateral decision will divide the nation. You're seeing it already from the commentary that's coming in. It'll make governing the people so much more challenging, with all the other implications on social cohesion and unity. This concept that we're running after, that we at this time of our development need now more than ever. So absolutely.
Whether this specific decision would lead to economic chaos, it's very hard to conclude on. The economy is multidimensional and so forth. But what we are deeply concerned about is that we've already seen division, lack of trust, political non-cooperation. Those things don't lead to anything good within a country, all right? And if we're going to have that political instability, as we made the point about earlier, that ultimately will lead to other things being, unstable within the country, all right? I used the term prior to now that we have a fledgling economy. Our democracy, to some extent, we should be in an incubator trying to, to resuscitate this life as a developing country. And when we tamper with the environment in which we do that, with simple things like this, it could be legal, but everybody's asking, is it right? All right, is it the right thing to do? Is it going to build trust? Is it going to enhance? Is it fair to all concerned? All right, I'm part of an organization
like a Rotarian
that I am, but are those principles going to be adhered to? All right.
Well, I mean, we can. I mean, the point that Rami just make about the fledgling democracy, I mean, it is a very good point. And I would just like to put a different framing to it. From the standpoint of a youth, someone going to school, who is a student of law, or who is a student of politics, this discourse that you're seeing happening nationally is not something that we can admire. I believe that as Guyanese people, as leaders, in civil society, private sector, government, opposition, parliamentary, I believe that we need to show better example in how we go about doing things. Because I said in the opening of the business summit on behalf of the chairman that our kids are watching, our family, friends, everybody are watching, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, everybody are watching our actions as leaders out there on the platform. So we don't want to say doom and gloom about this, and we can't quantify, as Ramesh rightly said, that a single decision will lead to that. But we have a track record. This country have a track record. Around election time, everybody fearful of everything. And it'll lead, and that is the kind of thing, in investment management, they call it a snake bite effect. If you get bite with a snake, you don't want to go back there. So, it's something that is a real fear that people have. And I mean, if you are a person that would normally be on social media, you will see that, the division that Anna just spoke of, you're seeing is coming from various aspects. But you're seeing people are, their views are coming out
Yeah.
from their fingertips.
Do you believe that, and assuming that President Granger must be aware of those dangers, do you believe he has really acted in the interest of that cohesion and the national interest, a united national interest?
Go ahead, Anna.
If I could start and there I'll continue.
And Indar offered you to go on it for us. Interesting.
Thank you, Indar. Yeah, these young people are very respectful of each other. Thank you, Indar.
To a national award, yes.
Thank you. No, but to say, Chris, that to this add on before Indara comes in, what is important is for us as Guyanese citizens, we must be able to believe in what our policymakers are saying. And one of the things that concerns me is for example, a couple of months ago we had a decision where, for example, former Chief Justice Kennard, recipient of the Order of Rhyme and OLS, I understand, right, was removed from his post because of his age. Now, if you're taking a policy decision that you want to have, a age limit, and start building capacity among the middle-aged or say the youth, well then that ought to carry through across the board. What confuses me is how do you cherry pick that you could have the age applicable to one institution but it's not applicable to another. So in the broader context outside of the Elections Commission, I'm just saying nationally that when my policymaker says something, we must be able to trust that position as being a very across the board.
So you're saying that this action by him was evinces a lack of trust in him.
Well, it makes me sort of question, how do you say something a couple of months ago and then a couple of months later you do something else? That's very important for us to be able to, to have trust, to move forward. I just wanted to preempt my position on that,
But that question really should be for President Granger. If he would know if
President Granger has not responded to my
yes.
many
So,
requests
yes.
to come and play and talk,
Yeah.
as many of his ministers.
I would like to go to the area of a good faith process, right? A good faith process, and I believe that if a process is ongoing, you can't say much about.
My question was, did he take account of the very fears that the Private Sector Commission has identified?
I don't think we might be in a position to rationalize the
Yes.
thought process that the president went through.
Might be difficult.
And I'm sure
What's
he's
your view? What's your
intelligent.
view?
I'm sure he might have considered many things. And I think utmost in his mind might have been filling the constitutional void, as he mentioned in his remarks at the installation of the chairman.
And that delay was due to whom?
That's
Partly self-induced. Partly self-induced.
Well, it could be, but we are where we are at this point in time. But on your question, let's step back to the issue. And I spoke about trust and the whole issue whether we can trust our politicians or policymakers. Consistency and lack of consistency is a big contributing factor to that. Let's focus on GECOM as an institution and why it is important for them to be independent, impartial. All right, and the kind of statements that the president would say that they want. Confidence is important. We go to a doctor, the doctor gives us a prescription, and whatever they tell us to drink, we go systematically and drink that. A very small percentage of us would actually question the doctor and go for a second opinion and go and check it on drugs.com and so forth. But why we have such confidence in doctor? Because of their training, their background, and because they're just called doctors. All right. Same thing for lawyers, accountants, and many other professions in the world. All right. It is a matter
Does that apply
of
to politicians as well?
Well,
that question of trust.
Politicians just it should really be, but let's not go down that road there.
No, but
I'm talking about the issue of confidence here, right? So
we need to develop it.
When you have an institution like GECOM whereby all of these things are going to be questionable, all right, that erodes this confidence. That erodes our trust in what is taking place. It will be very, very unfortunate. There are lots of preemption. People are actually thinking that a lot of bad things are going to happen. Suppose nothing bad happens or is intended to happen and everything goes as per norm and the current government wins the election free and fair. It's very unfortunate that it will be under a cloud and they will not be able to continue into the future convincing people that it was free and fair. So, and who would have caused that? They would have caused that on themselves. They would have created that doubt in people's minds.
The president's decision.
The president's decision.
Now,
All right.
I was hoping to get a more direct answer, but you're free. Because I was going to ask, do you believe that Opposition Leader Barrett Jagdeo's statement about non-cooperation with the government in any way helps the economy and the country?
Ramesh mentioned something about it, but I just want to continue from his comments about if the president calculated all of these risk factors when he made.
He had
that
enough
decision.
time, 10 weeks, 10 months to,
Yeah, so
to
I
factor
would-
those
I would-
considerations.
Any leader, when making such a decision that is a heavy issue, I would call it a heavy issue, would normally have people surround him, his legal team, and so on, and advise on some of the issues that you're gonna get arising from each decision. Each decision have a trajectory, and you have a tail of consequences running after it. So I'm sure that this was, something that was factored into the decision. So I guess maybe what was done. We have to see where it goes from here. But I'm saying that the decision the president has made, we have somebody now that is appointed, and we at the private sector have an issue with that, and that is why we are here on this show.
You know,
we have an issue with it.
But to come to your question about the non-cooperation and personally, my view is such a call was a bit premature and somewhat emotional on behalf of the leader of the opposition to do this. And I have no fear or favor in saying this, because there are certain things in our country that are sacrosanct and shouldn't be political. Like our border issues should not be political. Issues like health, education, and so forth shouldn't be political footballs, right? And non-cooperation could lead to many of the supporters of the opposition being exposed if they're not going to be taken care of. And that's what I'm fearful of. When you do root cause analysis when problems occur, the president made a decision, the opposition leader respond. His response is non-cooperation. That leads to political instability, ultimately leads to economic instability. Good? So I think that, whilst I understand the opposition's point of view on why this decision should not be accepted in the manner it is, I believe that there's still room for some level of cooperation, in particularly on the issue of our borders and our international and national security and so forth.
Who has the responsibility here? We are saying premature and not irresponsible, leading to that. Is it the president? Is it the leader of the opposition? As you're saying, that they're both to be blamed for this imbroglio in which we find ourselves. That's your statement. The Private Sector Commission statement.
Okay, you're referring to the published statement.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Well, it is both parties have a responsibility of ensuring that the chairman of the GECOM has been selected appropriately and fairly. It is going to be easy for society to cast blame on one side versus the other. I don't know if there's a way that we could actually measure who to blame more or who to blame less. All right. But the leader of the opposition and the president are responsible for the selection of the chairman. All right. It was never envisaged that the decision would have been unilateral. It ends up that the decision is unilateral. The bigger question, is that good for Guyana? Is that good for society? Is that good for our social cohesion? Is that good for us as a country? The immediate response and feedback that we are getting from members, social media, and everything else, that this doesn't seem very good. Our statement actually said that we believe strongly that this is a very dangerous decision, very dangerous precedent also.
But Chris, just to interject though a little bit on that point, in terms of you asking,
Who's the adult in the room?
where we classed in the blame where it should go, but come back to even, for example, I think the second list when it was deemed unacceptable, and there was agreement that you'll have a high-level committee set up comprising of representatives from the government as well as the opposition, which at the time, for me as a citizen, gave me hope that there was some sort of level of willingness to engage with each other and, find a resolution in the way forward. But then again, after the fact of the unilateral decision, when questioned on why that high-level committee that was committed to never functioned, we were told that because it would have been unconstitutional. Well, then if it was unconstitutional to engage, well, then why set it up in the first place? So I think in terms of moving forward, it is really imperative that, we have the best advice possible in moving forward to reduce, any further friction, So for me, going forward, I would want to know that, we despite all of this very obvious division, that we look at some sort of mechanism that, that we have to have some sort of, exchange from both the government and the opposition. Both of them represent very large, populations. That we have to have that moving forward. There's no alternative.
Yeah, but I want to say something just to put it on a different frame. Guyanese people, life hard in Guyana. I grew up tough, real tough. Everybody busy, everybody hustling. They're hustling. The taxi driver, the minibus man, the people at the market, the mom and pop shop, everybody hustling to make a living. When you busy hustling to make a living, these things with GECOM appointment of chairman, we expect that their leaders will get it right. Now, when they're not getting it right, and you now looking at your future, where you're going to be, if you're going to stay in the country, if you want to stick around to go through more, instability as we have done in the past, it starts to send a different kind of feeling in one's mind and one's heart about the trajectory, the planning, the children's, where they're going to end up on these kind of things. So, as citizens of this country, we are to make sure that we say our part, because.
Yeah, but we set our part in the elections.
Yes, but I'm saying...
You can't, and now you're talking and you get abused on social media.
No, but I'm saying, if you talk and you don't expect repercussion, well, then something is wrong. We are here, we are talking.
You don't expect abuse. You don't expect abuse.
Mr. Ram, you made a point there that we made our views at the election. It's very unfortunate that we have a country that only elections is when we make our views. The point I'm making here is that that's probably the only meaningful avenue for citizens to make their views known once every 5 years.
You remember what Mr. Ramjatan said the other day? If you don't like what we're doing, vote us out. Rather than saying, look, I'm going to listen to your concerns.
Yeah, but 5 years in the life
absolutely
of life of a country is a little bit too long.
Of a person.
But
and that's where that brings us now, how do we fix this going forward? We can't continue under the same framework forever. Right?
Governance.
I think constitutional reform has been an overused term, but an important reality that we need to face. What we need here is a mechanism whereby such important office holders cannot be left on two individuals alone to deal with, or even the president alone. There must be some level of scrutiny of the individual. Not even the media or the press was given an opportunity to scrutinize this elected candidate because they had such a short period of time before the swearing in and everything that took place. What I'm leading to here, like for example, in the U.S. and many other countries, send them to the parliament or the Senate or whomever they were for open scrutiny. You understand? So we know exactly what we're dealing with. So a week or two from now, we won't get all the skeletons in the closet.
When people are in opposition, they want constitutional change. When they get in government, they don't.
Well, we are seeing that because a lot of this the big items, important items that we saw during the election, the campaign, and 2 years later, we're still waiting on some of them to come to fruit. But I think, Chris, I don't think we should be influenced by what the social media positions are. I think what is important is that we start focusing on informing civil society. Let's deal with the facts here rather than emotive sort of
How does that change the substance of? That's what we're talking about. This is good.
I'm getting there. Allow me to land.
How do we change?
Allow me to land. So, for example, I think a lot of the vitriol on social media, it comes from people not being informed, as one. Two, I think that we need to start looking at how civil society, and this could be considered beginning of that, civil society needs to be more engaged and willing to speak to our policymakers. We'll be doing this now. We're here speaking very honestly, right, with the best of intentions. that, hey, I mean, government and leader of opposition, we would like to have, our voices heard.
But
and this needs to mean, in terms of moving forward, get stronger because, we need a very active civil society.
civil, in essence, if we were to come back to this process here, the opposition leader had the responsibility of selecting 6 names. I was part of several consultations as members of civil society that put up our name. I think out of the 18 names coming from the particular organization that we were active in, which is the private sector, is at least 4 names out of those 18 names. Right? So, civil society, the Constitution, the Constitution has given civil society a part to play with it, even though that role has been led by the opposition leader according to the Constitution. All of the names that we presented were all rejected. Good? So, I'm not sure. You're saying here that civil society should be active. Civil society was active in the proposal of names for the GECOM
Be
chairman.
more active moving forward in terms of where do we go from here, right? Because
I agree with you on that, but I just wanted to make the point that
Yeah.
civil
The
society
question
is also being ignored.
Let's talk. We're going to come back to the how.
So we need to demand to be
no,
heard.
no, it's one thing to say. It's all right to say those things about demand. They mean nothing. In practice, they mean nothing.
I disagree.
You make your budget proposals, and nothing happens. These are the facts. Now, the names that have been submitted.
Okay.
There have been 80 names. You had a former chancellor. You've had, I think, 2 judges of the Court of Appeal. You have at least, inclusive of those, you had 9 persons who are constitutionally deemed fit and proper. Because the law says judge, former judge, eligible to be a judge, or other fit and proper. That other means those that came before it are deemed constitutionally fit and proper.
We had 2 major generals.
You had 2 major generals.
You had
You
one.
had-
You had one that actually chaired
GECOM
the
before.
GECOM. Yeah.
And the president then says, look, forget all of that. He says, forget the Chief Justice's ruling on this constitution that I have to give reason for every
Everyone.
rejection that I make. He says, forget that. What do you say about such coarse disregard for the constitution, for the private sector, for the court? Here is your Honorable Chief Justice saying you must do that.
In the best interest of democracy.
And isn't that contempt for the court as well? Contempt for the constitution? Contempt for civil society?
For me, I think it's disappointing that we have not gotten answers because I believe the timing of the ruling was between the second to the third set of names.
Yes.
Right? So really it will bind the last 6 names in terms of giving explanations for each one of them, right? I believe it's disappointing that we have not gotten explanations because looking at those
Reasons,
names,
not explanations.
reasons
The
for
court said
yeah,
reasons.
for not
This is not
yes,
gaffe.
yeah, not for not choosing any one of them. I believe that a former chairman of GECOM was also another Mr. Joe Singh. I think they have Mr. LaFleur.
A man who
Then-
was senior enough to protect the territorial integrity as head of the
The head of GDF.
the head of the GECOM. So,
and he's not fit and proper.
so
2 of them actually.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Oh yes, our own Norman.
yes, yes. But this last list, mainly because of this ruling that you just referred to, there are 4 sections in the conclusion of that, A, B, C, and D. And when we looked at the verbiage of those, the conclusion of the Honor Roxanne George, the Chief Justice acting, we found that the current actions by the President did not fit well with those rulings. We've looked at them over and over. We had legal advice on the actions versus the ruling, and they did not fit well. Right, so I don't know if it can be mounted as contempt for the court.
I don't think the president can be brought
Yeah,
for
I don't
contempt.
think
but
that. I don't
but
think
it's,
that.
It wasn't in a legal sense. If you
Right.
show disregard,
Disregard.
what's your view, Amish?
You know,
Always careful with your words, which is what I
well, not
admire
only
about
that,
you.
as I said before, I will leave matters from the Chief Justice on issues of constitution.
No, this is
for the
where
la-
she has made a ruling, and
Yeah,
he hasn't complied with that.
I've been reliably informed that all of these will be taken to court on Monday or Tuesday of this week. So I'll leave that process there. I keep emphasizing here the fairness of GECOM and why it's important. All right, during the last elections, fortunately or unfortunately, I had the responsibility as the chairman of the Private Sector Commission to be a significant player within the game there in the context of observing the election, observing the process, and so forth. On elections day, I traveled throughout the entire country with members of the diplomatic community and so forth. Because of what we would have seen and the manner in which GECOM was set up, we would have expressed tremendous confidence in how GECOM operated, the structures, the leaders, and all of that. Upon the announcement of result, all right, we had despite cries of the opposition that there were challenges and problems and so forth. To date, I have no material information to indicate to me that the election results are flawed and so forth. And I stand by my support of that. I'm saying that, I'm building that case up for you to understand that at that point in time, I had a lot of confidence in what is taking place.
All right, you raised the question about the court just now. Do you know there's an election petition against those elections?
Well, actually,
and the court has acted as it should.
That's what I was leading to. So throughout this entire process, we believe that once the results, we subscribe to the fact that when I say we, the private sector, and those other observers at that point in time, including members of the Carter Center and so forth, that once the results are announced, your only legal recourse is to do your elections petition. Mm-hmm. One of the disappointing things is that it takes so long for election petitions to be heard in the court. All right, we've seen Caribbean countries having their petitions.
Kenya?
Kenya, all of those.
Can I tell you how it's supposed to be? It is supposed to be heard from day to day. You don't have a delay in the hearing of election petition, but it's because our private sector, our society generally, tolerates this kind of sloth and inefficiency. The law is clear. On election petitions, the court meets from day to day. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Who should we hold in contempt of that now?
Well, it's
you can't hold all of us.
No, I'm not saying no. Then you have to start being critical of the court. Why not? The court is not above criticism. If it errs, it should be held accountable. If the politicians err, we hold them accountable. If the private sector commission errs,
yes, we should be held accountable.
That's the duty of all of us.
So I want to say this now, right? Coming off what Rami just said about the private sector commission and Arjoon Chamber of Commerce and us being part and parcel of observing elections. Just think around 2020 when that time comes and you have the same situation. What would be our position and our sentiments at that time? When you have the institution that you had to put faith in is one that, the constructs were not done properly. So it puts us in a very uncomfortable position to observe and so on.
Annette raised the point just now about President Granger going back on this age threshold. He also published sometime in June, I think. He gave the opposition leader a list of the criteria that
that considers fit and proper.
That's considered fit and proper. It included a religious leader. Has the president gone back on that in relation to Justice Patterson?
I won't comment on whether he has gone back, but what I had to say, when that list of definitions were given in terms of what was fit and proper, I wrote to the leaders of the Private Sector Commission and said I will abstain from any participation of the process because I believe the president was trying to add to the Constitution by putting those definitions in. And I didn't want to be part of a flawed process of that. So my view then is that the explanation of what is considered fit and proper, I don't think the president had a role or should have had a role in defining that. That should have been interpreted either by the court or by the Constitution itself. So for me, that act in itself was improper.
But coming back to the mixed message.
But yes, the president. That's right.
Coming back to
he said the standard.
Yeah, but coming back to the mixed messages that I alluded to, right? If you're referring to the fact that Justice Patterson is a pastor, I think, and the fact that if President Granger set those criteria, which, like here's where I'm coming back to, outside of the the elections commissioner and the whole. But when you have a policy decision, it should be carried through across the board, you know. And this is where I'm getting a little insecure about when we cherry pick on the baselines that we set.
It should
That we
be
start cherry picking, because then I think, you know, okay, well, what will happen in another 8 months' time, you know? And coming back to your reference to Major General and being a former chairman of the Elections Commission, Joe, you know, we are, you know, having the next elections in 2020. What ought to have been a chairman in place?
We have elections next year.
What-
right?
what-
next
yeah.
year,
Local government
local
elections.
government election.
but okay, we're talking about the general election, national election, but what ought to have been a chairman in place to start making sure, and I was happy actually when no less than a person than Mr. Lowenfield himself 2 weeks ago did an interview where he stated that yes, it's essential to have a chairman in place for the elections
nothing
GECOM
gets
to function, you know.
nothing gets done.
Right. So here is where, you know, coming back to one of the candidates who had already run a very successful term, now being, I think, considerably very strong to be a candidate too. I mean, you know, so how do we look at moving forward, and you know, making sure that going forward into 2020, whatever needs to be in place is in place, you know, because like it's not about Justice Patterson, it's about the process and the integrity of the institution, and how do we
How do you
play a role,
separate?
you
How
know?
do you separate the institution from the whole of the institution?
No. What I'm saying that right now our focus is on the process rather than the person.
No,
And-
but you don't the person now.
Right.
Well,
Before we
I'm
go to-
I'm not sure we
well,
can
let's first-
separate the institution from the part, but what it will require from us if there's no changes in this particular scenario, what we have to do, if this is the ultimate agency that will be responsible for free and fair election and elections that is free from fear, all right, is that we have to be vigilant, like extremely vigilant and participative in the entire process of ensuring that we have decent elections being held, because that is what is being questioned at this point in time. Is it possible to happen? Whether it could happen, you know, and everybody's quoting history and everything else. So it means, therefore, if there's 1,962 polling places, you need to have people who are going to watch those polling places like hawks, make sure that the other elements of counting votes at the place of poll. Now, we're not there as yet, right? But the point I'm making here is that in order for you to have confidence, you have to have vigilance, and that we will have to have a large number of members of civil society ensuring that they participate fully in the process of observing
But you accept
and
you
all
ac-
of that.
You accept
That is if we
you-
are unable
you
to do
ac-
anything
you
else.
accept, Mr. Persaud, that the fairness of elections is not only determined and defined by what happens on the date of the elections.
Correctly.
Of course, absolutely.
So I just want to make a comment. To go back to the list of criteria that you asked, Ramesh, it is my knowledge that the president is a creature of the Constitution. So to add to that, there's a process of changing the Constitution, interpreting it. And interpretation,
He's also sworn to uphold the Constitution.
yes, and the interpretation came out with a ruling from the Chief Justice, right? So any interpretation of the Constitution goes through a process, right? Any addition, deletions have to go through a process, and the process that the president had some list of criteria for the person who to become that chair. I think that was not right in no sense that you look at it. Coming back to the issue of elections and GECOM, again, you know, we said just now that this decision is difficult to quantify how it will affect the economy. You know that this decision to unilaterally appoint somebody to head GECOM, you know that will affect elections.
Why?
Because there is 6 commissioners. The coalition have 3, the PPP have 3, and the chairman is a casting vote. So most of the decision really rests with the chairman of GECOM. So things like electronic tabulation, you're in late 2017 now. If you got to go down that route, you need planning. You need a whole lot of things to get in the tunnel before you can have that ready. You need changes to legislation if you want changes to anything to deal with election. That all of that decision, you have 3 commissioners and 3 commissioners. The chairman is the deciding vote. So the chairman plays a very pivotal role at GECOM. So to will impact the outcome, the process of
But
election.
let's come back to
fairness
Mr. Ram's point there about this is not about elections or elections day and all of that. This is about how we are seen as a country and a democracy, right? In the wider world out there, our state and phase of development as a country. You know, election is just one element of that democratic process, all right? A substantial element, albeit. And a lot is required in its preparation up to that point in time. And if something is wrong with the way GECOM is managed or the perception of the institution not being fair, my fear of it is that you will have a lot of people who will not want to participate in the process. Like you might have people who are contemplating, like for example, in Kenya. Kenya is supposed to have their elections next week, but the opposition is threatening boycott of the election because they don't have confidence in the elections commission. Now, when you have boycotting taking place and non-participation, non-cooperation, and all those things, it's not the leaders there who are those party members that suffer. You know, it's all of us suffer as a country because everything
Over
that
2,000
everything becomes standstill. All right, at that point in time, and those are the things that we are fearful of. That's why the manner in which the GECOM chairman was supposed to be selected, you know, the recommendations were done no other than one of the former president of the United States. Not that he's a god or an angel, but I think he comes from a highly respect, and the formula was created to contribute to fairness. All right, we Indar spoke the other day about game theory. There is no way what the president did is contributing to win-win. Right? All it does is contribute to win-lose, and that is not fair for us as citizens of the country.
Why is it we should have an election machinery that is considered so almost dominant, not important, obviously has to be important. How many other countries, we talk of Kenya, we seem to spend an undue amount, or maybe a due amount, of interest and concern and time on election commission. Isn't there a better model? I mean, think of all the other countries that have elections, and India can call an election within a month, and that's how many people? 750 million people. We have a 750 million, and we can't hold a proper elections that is free from fear of improprieties. What's wrong with us?
Well, you know the thing. You know the thing is this, right? You have GECOM. What you need to do is check the annual budget allocation to GECOM over the past 10, 15 years. If you want development of that agency to conduct free and fair election in an effective manner, that by 6 o'clock in the afternoon you get all your results and then you can declare who win the election, you need to put money into it.
Mr.
get
Indar,
stuff
seriously,
but-
hold on.
but
Let
you
me make this point.
You need to get laws changed to fix it.
Let me make this point. Guyana has one of the highest per capita costs of elections in the world. I've published this information. There's no question about it. It's not shortage.
So we have a lot of, you know,
It's not shortage of money.
Yes, but
You know, before you go there, you know, GECOM seems to be the horse that we keep flogging all the time. In a small
Is it a
society,
mechanism? Is it a mechanism?
there is a lot wrong
Because
with
you
the
have two political parties.
there's a
that
lot
is
wrong with the
politically controlled.
mechanism.
You
You know,
answer your own question.
yeah, but if I could contribute it, there's a lot wrong with the mechanism. There's a lot wrong with society as a whole in how we are structured, right? The winner-take-all system can't continuously keep working. We have to have mechanisms. You know, there's a lot of inequality in this society, you know, right? Inequality in the context of who's rich and who's poor. You know, economic inequality and a whole host of other that are contributing to many of these things. You know, we need to find a formula, and it's not GECOM is the only formula that needs to be fixed. There are many other things that need fixing. How do we ensure that Amerindians are fairly treated, Africans are fairly treated, Indians are fairly treated, everybody is fairly treated, and not when one party wins, you know, they take over everything. So we shouldn't complain about that every time there is a problem, but this is where the point, you know, of constitutional electoral reform and all of that needs to be paid attention to. The manner in which we have right now, all right, we're beating up GECOM as the only institution because
I don't think we are.
but
this program has been about GECOM as such.
yeah, but you know, we look at GECOM as such an important thing because there's so many other things that are failing in society. All right, that's just my view. And
But-
a lot has to be done to fix many of those other institutions also.
But you see, you talk about these matters now. The public service, all these constitutional bodies are headless.
But those are things we need fixing.
No, Ramesh. The point is the Constitution already provides for those things. I don't agree with Nigel Hughes that we have the most advanced constitution in the Caribbean. He said that at the Private Sector Commission, and I was wondering why then we need constitutional reform. But you have a whole host of constitutional commissions, which we are ignoring, which you talk about inequality. I did some research. Our inequality is far worse than in the United States of America. What are we doing in terms of our social policies, the private sector? Better wages, better working conditions. So we all have the responsibility. You talk about what we're doing for Amerindians. Amerindians are protected under this constitution. We also have anti-discrimination. But if you don't, you have the mechanisms here. You have persons who are sworn to uphold the Constitution. When you question them, they say, "Well, you want to do chop off my hand if I don't, have the follow through with the Constitution." How do you deal with that? How do you deal with that?
Well,
How do you deal with that?
Whether the Constitution is the best in the Caribbean or it's not, it's imperfect. I think what is really, really essential is that we must respect the Constitution, and we must be guided by the Constitution. And when that is lacking, in some instances, well, then you also have all the other ramifications of that disrespect to your own very Constitution. So, I mean, apart from the constitutional reform, which is very important and all of that, I think we need to also be very clear that, we expect everybody to be guided and by the respect and adherence to the Constitution.
So this
Right?
is just something to throw on the table. What is required in Parliament? What vote is required in Parliament to change the Constitution?
There are different levels
Different types of changes.
of voting. There are some votes that require going to the people
Yeah, by referendum.
by referendum.
Yes.
There are others that you can do by 2/3. There are others that you can do by simple majority.
Okay. So
We have
A
a
reform
standing
process.
committee on parliamentary reform,
yeah, so
and again we ignore it.
so my thing here with the comment that Anna just made, right, is that we're talking about reform. We have a compliance issue for us. We're talking about reform, right? So if there's not political will to even elect a chairman, an agreement to elect a chairman of an office, are we going to reach the reform?
That's why
And that is the
that's
issue
why
we have to
the-
address.
when
How
this
we gonna
issue
reach
of
there?
non-cooperation came up the other day, I started to get worried because we have some very important legislation to be passed. Petroleum Commission,
The bill, yeah,
election,
they got a draft.
constitutional
which
reform,
needs to be
safety
apolitical.
which needs to be
Very
apolitical.
apolitical.
So those things worry me. But Mr. Ram, I'm not sure how much more time we have.
5.
How do we convince the public that you as a nominee and I'm not your chair, but I just wanted to ask you a question, that y'all are not just bitter that you were rejected. All right? I just being facetious here by asking that rude question. What are we really upset about? I mean, you were the chair of the program, but I just want to get your views on that.
I am not upset personally. Since you've asked me an open question, I will tell you I would have lost. I could not continue as managing partner of Raman Mapre. I could not continue to practice law. I would have had to give up all my employment. And I can assure you, and my tax returns will show it, that I would have lost significantly. I told, as I said, and I'm glad you asked this question, when Mr. Desmond Hoyt asked me to put up my name for the chairmanship of GECOM, I think it was in 2001, I said, "Mr. Hoyt, I will say yes for 2 reasons. One, you have never said no to me. And secondly, Barry Jagdeo would never accept me as chairman of GECOM."
But he nominated you, though.
When Jagdeo, yes, when he invited me to his office and asked me, I said, I almost repeated the same thing. And I said to him, I said, "Do you realize what you're asking me to do? The cost this would be?" Because I did not agree with past chairman of the commission, and I've said this to them. The Constitution says you can't engage in any other employment.
Yes.
The last chairman was publicly engaged in other employment. I was not prepared to do it. So, no, in a, look, I'm
Even
certain-
voluntary employment?
Even they said any form of employment.
Because you don't want to have any kind of influence. The
And
person
I
must
should
be
say
free
this as
from-
well. I
from
should say this
conflict.
as well. I said once I reached the age 70, I want no elected office. Now that's not quite an elected office. It's time that I step back. Give way to people like you.
So what's your view on that,
so,
Anna?
Okay, so my view, I think,
I hope I've answered your
and,
question.
and it is wearing
And you know what I'm going to do? You're going to come and
you,
you're going to. Would you like to be the co-chair of Future
That's
Play
all
Talk?
right. That's all right.
yeah, no, absolutely. I'm certainly not, was it term used, bitter and sour or whatever? Absolutely not. For me, I am always here to serve my country. And when I was, given the honor of being asked, if I was, I would be willing to put mine, absolutely. And I will continue to be open to serve, to give the highest level of national service. Which is why I'm saying that, despite this situation we find ourselves in, it is essential that we also look at mechanisms in moving forward, right? The young generations of Guyanese depend no less. So I'm certainly not bitter and sour.
Any further questions, Ramesh?
No further questions. No further questions.
Where do we go from? What does the private sector?
Plus Dave thinks I'm fit and proper.
What does the private sector commission do next?
Well, we've issued a statement.
That's why I said next.
Yeah, so that is the first round. There will be some newspaper postings, some articles and so on that will come after. Each individual's sectoral body is entitled to issue their own statement in support or not in support of what happened. They're free will to do so. Each chamber of commerce as well can do that as well. If they're in support of the unilateral appointment or not, they are free to do so. So the private sector commission as a body has issued a statement, but the sectoral bodies themselves will come and issue.
Yeah, if I could add to a few more things there. Engagement, constant engagement with all stakeholders will be an important element for us. We are commencing a process of engaging all members of the diplomatic community to express our concerns and fears that we may have had or that we currently have with regards to this. We are going to continue to keep watching the situation. We are going to join also any legal challenges an interpretation or request for interpretation through the court on this particular matter until we believe that the process is fair and that confidence is restored in GECOM.
Annette, you had the first word. You also
Absolutely.
allowed to have the last word.
No, well, I concur with what my colleague said, and like I said, wherever there is a problem, we have to be part of the solution. And I'm certainly committed to play my role in my own little way in the way forward.
Well, thank you very much. And as I close the program, saying thank you for the operators and viewers. Can I take this opportunity to invite you on Plain Talk to discuss the business summit which you held over the past week?
Sure,
Sure.
He
we
wants
can
to
do
get you
that.
to commit on record.
It's one of our proudest.
We have no challenge in doing that. We now have the report that is out. We are currently reviewing it, and we will come to discuss it with you.
Well, thank you very much for that assurance.
Good move.
On that note, operators and viewers, thank you, good night. Remember, this was a special edition of Plain Talk to deal with the appointment of a chairman of the Elections Commission. See you next week.